Welcome to the Roberts Law Office Injury Podcast. Kentucky attorney Jeff Roberts has over 25 years of experience. He'll provide answers to your questions related to personal injury and automobile accidents, workers' compensation claims, and Social Security disability benefits. Let's join Jeff for this episode. And friends, welcome back. We are back in Calloway County with attorney Jeff Roberts. Jeff, how are you, guy?
I'm doing good. How are you, Jim?
Buddy, I'm doing good. Today we're going to talk about filing claims for PTSD, which is kind of an interesting topic because we're going to talk about workers' comp situations. We'll talk about personal injury, usually motor vehicle accidents, and then also how it could relate in a Social Security disability type claim.
Correct.
Fantastic. So, Jeff, you've been practicing here for almost 33 years now. So, I would think over the decades you've actually seen a number of various claims for PTSD.
I have. I've been practicing. It'll be 33 years in about 3 months.
Yep.
And through my career, I have represented several people with PTSD or post-traumatic stress disorder. I see it in, you've talked about the three areas that I practice, and I do see it in all three areas of those practices. From a workers' comp perspective, you see that a lot in, it kind of depends on how the injury occurs in those type of claims. I see it frequently in cases where someone is at work and there's some sort of an explosion or something of that nature that occurs there. I've seen it with, here locally in western Kentucky a few years ago, as we all will recall, the tornado that came through and took out the candle factory over in Mayfield, and several of those had PTSD as a result of what they went through there in that incident, and frankly others had PTSD from going through the tornado as well, even whether they were not at work, but associated with that from there. And I think we've already done an episode actually in the past where we talked about PTSD in regard to first responders, police, firefighters, ambulance personnel, those types of individuals, and just the nature of their work can result in those. That profession had a high concentration of PTSD from what I've seen in my practice, and statistically I haven't looked at it.
But I would think whether you're a state trooper, a local police officer, a sheriff, or even a firefighter, EMS, you're going to see some horrific scenes when you arrive. And, just how can that not affect you over time, especially when that's something you do on a fairly regular basis?
Yes.
And unfortunately for first responders, and we talked about back in episode 51, I believe it was, the police officers right now, law enforcement, first responders, have a tougher time getting any kind of workers' comp benefits for PTSD. Do you want to touch on that just briefly?
Well, I don't know that I'd say it's a tougher time getting PTSD benefits. It's the same standard for everyone, but part of the problem is with the way Kentucky law is now for any type of psychological injury, which PTSD qualifies as, it has to be associated with some sort of a physically traumatic event, a physical injury. So, and unfortunately, a lot of times with first responders, it's going to a crash scene and what they witness and what they see. So they have there's a lot of times they may have PTSD that is not a compensable work injury, whereas working in a factory, you're not exposed to all of that. If there is an explosion and someone is in a completely different area of the plant and comes over to help after the explosion and they see their coworkers seriously injured and they're helping with that, but they're not themselves have any kind of injury because they weren't around that, they're going to face the exact same situation. It wasn't physically traumatic, wasn't an injury to them type situation. So they're not going to be covered either. It's just that, unfortunately, police officers and other first responders are exposed to those type of physically traumatic or mentally traumatic events that aren't from a physical trauma to themselves more frequently than other workers are.
Yeah,
And that's something that, frankly, should have been corrected by the legislature years ago.
Well, I think so, and I think as more and more people become aware of just the big challenges of mental health problems, that hopefully that'll get changed, maybe in an upcoming session. I mean,
Correct.
that would be that one seems like a fairly low bar to clear. When you're looking to first responders in particular,
Right.
And I could definitely see a carve out there.
Yeah.
If we get that done. For reference, episode 35 was the episode we did on the Mayfield tornadoes. And anybody who's been through a natural disaster, we've had floods, Texas most recently, but we had them in the Carolinas and other places.
In Pikeville, Eastern Kentucky, some floods, a couple of different bouts of floods, unfortunately. So.
Yeah, so you got to think there's going to be some psychological repercussions from natural disasters like that.
Right.
It's just unbelievably unfortunate. And then, Jeff, we also talked in episode 97 about filing claims for pain and suffering. And in that episode, we touched on PTSD. And that's kind of what this comes up with, or how this, this episode came about. What is it about PTSD that allows it to be covered, for instance, in a workers' comp claim? Is it just the inability to continue to work at your local level, at your normal level?
It's not necessarily an inability to work. It can be certainly a big part of that. But in a workers' compensation claim, any psychological injury can be compensable. Again, it's got to be associated with a physically traumatic event. In regard to police officers, if they're in a scuffle or there's with a suspect and injuries result or serious injuries result out of that can cause PTSD for the officers. Those are compensable from that standpoint.
Again, it comes down to that hurdle. There was a physical interaction.
Some sort of physical trauma to the body as well. And it doesn't have to result in a permanent injury, just some sort of physical trauma, scratch or anything like that. Gets over that initial hurdle that it's part of a physical trauma event.
So let me build off of that real quickly. If I'm a police officer or a sheriff or a deputy or somebody like that, and I'm involved in a shooting, a gunfight, maybe I'm not the one who's actually shooting the victim. Maybe we're just exchanging shots. Does that not qualify for PTSD because there's no physical contact of some sort?
All of these are on a case-by-case basis from that standpoint, so you've got to look at it really, really close from there if you can show any sort of physical trauma.
Yeah.
So if the officer had to get behind their car and they bumped, when they did, they got down behind the car and they bumped into the car and just got a little bruise on their arm. That's going to qualify, even though they weren't hit by a bullet. That part there qualifies. If it is, the person pulls a gun on them, and they return, fire. We'll just give an instance that the person pulls a gun, points it, but the police officer reacts quick enough, and the person doesn't pull the trigger, and there's a shooting, and the officer has PTSD over having been in that incident. Unfortunately, suicide by cop does occur. And so that, if they're involved in that incident, there's really nothing physically traumatic to the officer in that regard, probably not going to be covered in that situation.
Like you said, as with most of these things, it's very fact specific.
Correct.
But, wow, what a tragedy for first responders. And again, just coming back to what we said earlier, I hope there's a way to maybe get that turned around eventually. So again, it doesn't have to be an inability to do their job. It's just the lasting effects of a psychological disorder at this point, right?
Correct. And with any other workers' compensation claim, to be able to get permanent disability benefits, it has to result in a permanent impairment under the fifth edition of the AMA Guides to Impairment, which is a book nobody's ever heard of unless they've been involved in workers' comp cases, but that's the guide that we use the first hurdle that we have to overcome with PTSD, we have to first overcome was a result of a traumatic incident. With any psychological claim, you have to overcome that hurdle. But then with any workers' comp claim, before you get permanent disability benefits, you have to have a permanent impairment rating. And so if the PTSD results in an impairment rating, you get permanent disability benefits for it. Even if you're able to go back to work in function, then you still get permanent partial disability benefits. If it's severe enough that it prevents you from working, then we could be looking at permanent total disability from a workers' comp standpoint at that point in time. But the first step is to get proper mental health treatment. In this state, historically in the U.S., I think, not just in this state, we have kind of pushed mental health treatment kind of on the back burner, so to speak, and it's looked at, has always been looked at in the past at least as, you don't need to get that treatment, just rub some dirt on it and move on type situation.
Tough it out. Yeah.
Tough it out, and that, frankly, my view on mental health treatment has changed over the 33 years. When I was a young attorney, in societal norms back then, you just didn't recommend people to get mental health treatment, didn't refer people to mental health treatment. Over the years, seeing what psychological counseling can do for people, what mental health counseling can do, and seeing in my own clients the change in their quality of life after they've received that, how their quality of life has improved, how the family's quality of life has improved because the person got appropriate mental health counseling through either a counselor, a psychologist. If they need medication, then the proper medication from a psychiatrist to deal with their mental health issues as well. And after seeing this over the course of my career, and I frankly realized this years and years ago now, but after seeing that, I am a very firm believer in people seeking mental health treatment. It doesn't always cure the problem. It may not ever cure the problems or any of them, but it helps people to cope and to live with the issues that they're dealing with, and helps. To me, what I've seen, it helps the entire family, not just the patient, but everybody in that family gets benefit from that patient getting the mental health treatment.
No, I mean, it would have to. I mean, because everybody else around, like you said, dealing with it, it can really be traumatic for the family as well as the individual.
Yes, and there's a stigma, and it's not as much of a stigma now that is going away, thankfully. Hopefully it'll be completely gone. I truly hope at some point in the not too distant future that taking care of your mental health will be seen as just as important as taking care of your physical health. But we're not there yet, but we're getting much closer than we ever were. So.
That makes sense. Jeff, let's stick with workers' comp here for a minute or two. So if I were to have some kind of issue at work and I have a resulting PTSD claim, normally, for instance, if I tore my rotator cuff, I mean, I would have medical treatment there. I would have maybe some surgeries. I might have some rehabilitation. All of that would be taken care of. And as you said, I might have later on a partial disability, or even, depending on the extent of a full disability. When it comes to PTSD, because this is more of a psychological type situation, you're not going to necessarily have surgeries and things like that. How do the benefits from workers' comp come to play for that individual?
Well, yeah, if you got PTSD, hopefully they're not recommending surgery for that. If they do, get a second opinion, and a third, and a fourth.
Yeah. It would be the treatment, right? It would be the ongoing
that's
counseling?
part of it. Yes, the treatment would be covered. The getting the mental health treatment seeing a psychologist, mental health counselor, psychiatrist, the medications that may be prescribed, all of that would be covered under workers' comp, should be covered under workers' comp, no co-pays, no deductibles. In fact, under workers' comp in Kentucky, you get reimbursed the mileage for seeking medical treatment, and it doesn't matter if it's mental health or physical health treatment. If you have to travel 60 miles to see a psychiatrist or 60 miles to see an orthopedic surgeon, doesn't matter. You traveled 60 miles to get treatment for your work injury, and it's compensable.
And I think that's important in some of the rural areas where you just may not have those mental health practitioners in your local community. So you may have to go outside of your normal area. And
Sure.
so that's good to know, right?
It is very good to know. There's psychologists and mental health counselors in Murray. There's mental health counselors in a lot of Western Kentucky. I couldn't tell you all the counties, but I know there's mental health counselors in Benton, Murray, Hopkinsville, Paducah, all those counties I practice in, or cities I practice in. From there, as far as true psychiatrists, Murray has psychiatrists, Paducah has psychiatrists. If there's a psychiatrist, there may be psychiatrists in Benton and in Mayfield, but if there are, I'm not familiar with who they are. I'm not saying there is or isn't. I don't know for sure. I'm just not familiar with any there. I'm comfortable. Hopkinsville has psychiatrists. So, yeah, if you need to see a psychiatrist, especially in rural Western Kentucky, you may have to travel a fairly decent distance to find a psychiatrist to be able to go to that person. So,
And that's usually ongoing treatment. So that mileage and the expense of that mileage can actually mount up. It's nice to know there is a reimbursement option.
yes, treatment for mental health, it can be, a lot of times it is to where, you start off much more frequently initially. PTSD by its definition is actually post-traumatic stress. You start off with an acute stress disorder, and then after it's lasted for a significant period of time, then it's considered post-traumatic stress. It goes from the acute to the post stage. So, when you're in that acute stress disorder, shortly after an event occurs, the treatment at that point in time is going to be much more frequent, or should be. At what I see is it's more frequent. You may be going in once a week for counseling in that regard. And then, if you're seeing a psychiatrist, they may be working on which medications are going to be best suited for you, and so you may see them even more frequently to come in and say, okay, you've been on this for a couple of weeks. How is it helping? Do we need adjust it, lower it? Do we need to switch to something else? So the treatment is much more frequent initially, and then as you get further out and learn to deal with things better, and hopefully they're giving you coping strategies, giving you things to do, kind of like when you go to physical therapy, they give you home exercises that you can do that you're supposed to do there. With the mental health, they do the same thing, or at least that's what I've seen. And then it may be once a month that you're going. But a lot of times with mental health PTSD issues, the treatment is for it continues for several years. The person can be at quote unquote maximum medical improvement, which only means that they don't anticipate in the next year significant improvement in the condition. So they think they're got as good as they're going to get. You kind of plateaued, but it doesn't mean you don't need to continue treatment for that. And so a lot of times when we resolve the claim, the person, part of the resolution of the claim in workers' comp can be and should be is a lot of times leaving the future medical benefits open so that the comp carrier has to pay those future medical benefits into the future for that person.
That makes sense. Well, Jeff, let's transition then to the topic of motor vehicle accidents and personal injury in general, where a PTSD claim might be involved. I mean, obviously, if you're in a serious traffic accident, something's happened to you or something's happened to a passenger, or just being really on the scene when something really, really tragic happens, it's going to impact you.
Correct.
And unfortunately, PTSD could be an outgrowth of that collision.
It certainly can be. If you're involved in the collision, you can see PTSD as a result of that, especially if you have a family member who's seriously injured and you witness that, or if you yourself are seriously injured in that. And so that you have PTSD in those cases. I see it even in less significant injury cases with minors as well. If they're involved in a motor vehicle accident, even when it's not, or there's no real serious injuries as a result of that, you can see minors having PTSD or acute stress and then PTSD and not want to ride. I've had, unfortunately, some children who, if the father was the one driving, then they didn't want to get in the car with the father. If it was involved a pickup truck that hit them, then anytime they saw a pickup truck coming toward them, they would have panic attack, essentially. And so getting that dealt with, again, the biggest first thing is to seek the medical treatment, get the treatment for that condition, because that's going to be, the getting it treated is kind of like a physical health problem. The earlier the treatment, generally the better the outcome. And it's the same with mental health as what I see in my practice anyway. The earlier you get it treated, hopefully it never converts over to PTSD. Hopefully the acute stress disorder gets treated and it goes away. But, even if it doesn't, the PTSD is probably going to be less severe if you got it treated than if you don't treat it. So.
That makes sense. Well, you were talking about the children involved in the accidents. Back in episode 38, we actually talked about dog bite claims, and we said this would be kind of a general personal injury. It falls under that umbrella.
Right.
And, a small child may now have an aversion to dogs just anytime they get around them or a certain breed or something like that. That can be disruptive, especially if you have a family pet.
Absolutely, it can be. And, yeah, I've seen that as well from that standpoint where with a family pet, but it's another dog, and then they're all of a sudden afraid of the family pet because now they fear dogs completely. So,
Right.
You see that in more than just car wrecks. Other personal injury claims, you certainly can see the PTSD aspects coming into play in those cases as well. So, just kind of depends on what causes it from that,
Wow. Now, Jeff, in your practice, and we've brought this up in previous episodes, you handle workers' comp, obviously. You handle various types of personal injury claims, but you also handle Social Security claims, and this would be disability or SSI, which is just supplemental security income claims. And PTSD, again, can come into play with those types of claims as well, right?
Oh, yes, they absolutely can come into play with those types of cases. A lot of times what I see, it can be from the incident like I talked about earlier. If it's part of a work injury, you're at a factory where there's an explosion occurs and you're injured as a result of that, and have PTSD and other physical injuries, then it could develop into a Social Security disability claim. Most of my experience, or what I've seen in my practice on PTSD in Social Security, or at least where I've seen it at more frequently, unfortunately, is in people who are victims of childhood sexual trauma. And I've represented, unfortunately, several ladies and a few men who were the victims of childhood sexual trauma that has had lifelong consequences for them. And unfortunately, the consequences were severe enough they weren't able to ever hold a job, and we've had SSI claims as a result of it, or they were able to work for a while, but it just got worse and worse over time, or there was something that triggered it to make it get worse, and they were no longer able to work in their Social Security disability claim. So I've seen that a lot. I've seen others were from the military standpoint, where they, somebody in the National Guard that got deployed and saw something, and there could be a VA claim out of that as well, but it affects, when they're not deployed or when they're no longer in, if they were active duty, Army or whatever branch, when they are no longer part of that, and then they're not capable of working, and there can be a Social Security disability, and frequently is. I've represented several former military in Social Security disability claims because of what occurred while they were in the service.
And again, just to qualify, you don't do VA benefit cases. You handle the Social Security disability side of it.
Correct.
But again, sometimes those kind of run together.
Correct.
Yeah,
Yes, I do
overlap.
not handle VA cases from that standpoint. I looked at them early on in my career. I looked at handling VA cases, and they limited the attorney fee to $20 back then. And I said, no, I'm not going to do that. So that has changed now, but I never did look into. I never did go into handling any VA cases after that. Well, I respect the military, and I'm usually very lenient on my fees to the military. I didn't want to limit myself to. I didn't want to work hundreds of hours for $20. So.
Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense. Jeff, back in episode 76, we covered something. This is, again, dealing with Social Security disability. We covered a listing of impairments. And one of the categories on there, and this is almost an automatic award, can include PTSD claims, right?
Yes, one of the mental health conditions under listings of impairment is PTSD. So if your PTSD is at listings level, that means you have the PTSD with these complicating factors and at this severity. Then, if the judge agrees that is the case, that you are at listings level, then you are automatically disabled at that point in time. So you don't have to go into establishing these are what my restrictions are. You've established your listings level from that standpoint.
And that just means that it would be a quicker resolution to the claim. If you don't have those complicating factors, you could still apply for and potentially win the case. Obviously, Jeff, if you're in there, you're gonna present that claim as effectively as you can.
Right.
But just because they don't have all those complicating factors doesn't mean they don't have a valid claim. It just means it may take a longer process. It may take the more normal process.
You can be successful in PTSD cases in Social Security if they are at listings level, or even if they're not at listings level, to show that it's severe enough to keep them working an 8-hour-a-day, 5-day-a-week job, essentially, or depending on what their age is. It varies as you get older from that standpoint. As far as it being quicker, yes, if they at the initial or the reconsideration level, the state doctors say, yes, this is at listings level, then you get it granted much quicker in that regard. But even if they don't think it's listings level, at the hearing, I can argue to the judge, and I've been successful arguing to the judge that the state doctors are wrong. This is at the listings level and has been at the listings level since the application was filed, and been successful in that regard. So it wasn't any quicker than the other ones would have been, but that's ultimately the way the judge ruled in the case.
And again, friends, if you're listening to this and you're interested in the Social Security aspect, again, we just referenced episode 76, but Jeff recently did episode 100. It talks about testifying at your Social Security disability hearing. That's another podcast episode out there that really kind of walks you through that relatively complicated process. But again, that's what Jeff's here for as an attorney, is to really take on the case and deal with the insurance and deal with gathering the facts and representing you very effectively. In court, or in this case at the various hearings. Jeff, let's talk about this real quickly. You actually have two offices. Now, today we're down here in Calloway County in Murray, right here on Main Street, where this has been your primary office for almost 33 years now, right?
Correct. Yes, I've been in this same location since October of '92.
Wow. And then a little bit more than a year ago, it hadn't been 2 years yet.
2023.
Almost 2 years.
Yeah,
almost 2 years.
August 1st, 2023. So I'm coming
Unbelievable.
up on 2 years. Yes.
Unbelievable, because we've actually done podcast episodes out of that office. So yeah, okay. So talk to us a little bit about your Hopkinsville, your Christian County
yes,
office.
I've got the office up in Christian County. My entire career, I've represented a lot of clients up in that area. I handle workers' comp, car wreck cases all over Kentucky. I handle Social Security cases even in other states. I'm licensed by the Social Security Administration to handle cases in all 50 states. But I opened that office up to better serve my clients up in that area. And it's worked out well. I think that's been a good fit for the clients and for me as well. And always enjoy going up to Hopkinsville to meet with clients. But I only have one phone number. I find that works better. The Hopkinsville office is a by appointment only office. And so the number to call to reach me, and that's the best way is by phone to reach me, is 270-753-0053. If you call during business hours, most likely, unless they're everybody's tied up on other lines, you're going to get a live person talking with you. And if you've got a question over any of this, if you've suffered PTSD as a result of a car wreck, work injury, or something else, but it's preventing you from working, you want to talk about Social Security disability, give me a call at that number, and we'll get a little information and set up a time for us to chat.
Outstanding. And Jeff, you tend to have a motto that we talk about at the close of these episodes, and it really kind of comes down to how you handle your clients, how you take on these cases when you take on these cases. And I think your Google reviews, actually, and I always like to put a link in the show notes to your Google page for down here in Murray, has an amazing number of 5-star reviews, and I think it's a testament back to how you guys try to represent that motto.
Yes, the office motto is that we provide small town service and deliver big city results. We try to live up to that motto in every case that we handle from there. And I do think the Google reviews that we have show that the clients also agree with that we're living up to that motto frequently. One of the things that they talk about is not only the results that we obtained for them, but also that we answered all the questions. We kept them informed of what was going on. We kept them up to date with everything. And, that's just, to me, I think that's the best way to represent people. And my clients, they are clients, but I've developed friendships with a lot of my clients. There's clients I've represented years ago that I still talk to. I had lunch with a former client not too long ago, actually. And so that's, to me, I want to develop that relationship with them.
Outstanding. Well, and that's the nice part about practicing in this area of the state is that people just want really good help. You offer that. You can go out and look at all the Google reviews and try to figure that out. Yeah, Jeff does a pretty good job. And it's, again, I just think it's nice to be able to sit across the table from someone and know that person's got your back and they're here to help. And I really appreciate what you do.
Thank you.
Jeff, we'll be back here in a couple of weeks.
Okay, thank you.
Take care, guy. Bye-bye.
Thank you for listening to the Roberts Law Office Injury Podcast. Jeff will return in 2 weeks. Until then, he invites you to visit jeffrobertslaw.com and follow his firm on Facebook. At the Roberts Law Office, you'll find a history of small town service and big city results.